The forest's demonic hunger. Deep in the heart of the forest, there was a creature unlike any other. It was known as the beast of the woods, and it was said to be a creature of immense power and savagery. Legend had it that the beast had been born in the heart of the forest, the offspring of a demon and a wild animal. It grew quickly, feasting on the flesh of other animals, and soon, even the humans who dared to enter its territory. As the years went by, the beast of the woods grew even more powerful. Its fur grew thicker, its muscles bulged with raw strength, and its teeth became razor sharp. It was said that the beast could tear apart a man with a single swipe of its massive paw. For centuries, the beast of the woods terrorized the surrounding villages, taking what it wanted and killing anyone who stood in its way. But over time, the villagers learned to avoid the forest and to stay away from the creature that dwelled within. But then, one day, a group of hunters decided to venture into the forest in search of game. They were a reckless bunch, unafraid of the stories they had heard about the beast of the woods. They believed that they could take down the creature and become legends themselves. They set up camp in a clearing, thinking that they were safe from the beast's reach. But as night fell, they heard a rustling in the bushes. They turned to face the sound, expecting to see a deer or rabbit. But instead, they saw the beast of the woods. It was even more terrifying than they could have imagined. Its eyes glowed red in the darkness, and its fur bristled with anger. The hunters tried to run, but the beast was too quick. It snatched them up with its massive jaws, one by one, tearing them apart with its razor-sharp teeth. Only one of the hunters survived, a man named Jack. He managed to outrun the beast, narrowly escaping with his life. But he knew that the beast of the woods would not let him go so easily. It would come for him, eventually. And so, Jack spent the rest of his life on the run, always looking over his shoulder and fearing for his life. He never returned to the forest again, and he never forgot the terror of that night. Years passed, and Jack grew old. He knew that the beast of the woods was still out there, waiting for him. He could feel its presence, even when he was miles away from the forest. And then, one day, it finally came for him. Jack was sitting in his rocking chair on the front porch of his house when he heard a rustling in the bushes. He turned to face the sound, and there it was, the beast of the woods. It was even more terrifying than he remembered it, with eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. Jack tried to run, but his legs felt like they were made of lead. The beast was getting closer, its breath hot on his neck. He knew he was going to die. But then, something strange happened. The beast of the woods stopped in its tracks, as if it had seen something that scared it even more than Jack. It turned and ran back into the woods, disappearing into the darkness. Jack was left alone, shaken and confused. He didn't know what had just happened, but he knew he had narrowly escaped with his life once again. In the end, Jack died of old age, but the memory of the beast of the woods never left him. He knew that it was still out there, waiting in the shadows, ready to strike at any moment, and that was the true horror of it all. As Jack's body was lowered into the ground, a sense of unease settled over the small town. The villagers had always known about the beast of the woods, but they had never truly believed in its existence. But now, with Jack's death, they knew that it was real, and that it was still out there somewhere. Rumors began to spread throughout the town, stories of strange noises in the forest and sightings of a large, shadowy creature lurking in the trees. Some claimed that the beast was searching for Jack's killer, while others said that it was simply hungry for more human flesh. The townspeople tried to reassure themselves that they were safe, that the beast would never come for them. But deep down, they knew that it was only a matter of time before it struck again. And then, one night, the beast attacked. It came out of nowhere, crashing through the town and tearing apart anything in its path. The villagers screamed and ran, but there was nowhere to hide from the beast's wrath. The creature seemed to be targeting certain individuals, those who had dared to enter the forest in search of game or who had spoken out against its existence. It hunted them down one by one, dragging them back to the forest to be devoured. The townspeople were helpless to stop it. They tried to mount a defense, but their weapons were useless against the beast's impenetrable fur and brute strength. They watched in horror as their friends and loved ones were torn apart before their very eyes. In the end, only a handful of people survived the attack. They fled the town, never looking back, and warned others to stay away from the forest at all costs. But even as they put distance between themselves and the beast, they knew that it would never truly be gone. The beast of the woods was a monster beyond human comprehension, a creature that existed outside of time and space. It could not be killed. It could not be tamed. It simply existed, a force of nature that would always be waiting in the shadows, ready to strike again. And so, the townspeople lived the rest of their lives in fear, always looking over their shoulders and waiting for the next attack. They knew that they were never truly safe, that the beast of the woods was always out there somewhere, waiting for its next victim, and that was the true horror of it all. This content may violate our content policy. If you believe this to be an error, please submit your feedback. Your input will aid our research in this area. Years passed since the horrific attack of the beast of the woods, but the town was never the same. The few survivors had moved on, but the memories of that night remained deeply ingrained in their minds. They never spoke of it to outsiders, fearing that they wouldn't be believed or worse, that the beast would somehow hear of their encounter. But despite their best efforts to forget, the beast had left its mark on the survivors. Nightmares plagued them, visions of the beast tearing them apart in its massive jaws. They would wake up in cold sweats, feeling as if the beast was watching them even in their sleep. As time passed, the survivors began to notice strange changes in their bodies. Their skin grew rough and matted, their eyesight sharpened, and their sense of smell became almost animalistic. It was as if they were becoming more like the beast itself. They tried to hide their transformations, but it was becoming increasingly difficult. The townspeople noticed the changes and began to fear them, calling them cursed and casting them out of their community. The survivors were forced to leave their homes, retreating to the outskirts of the town, where they lived in constant fear of the beast's return. As they watched from afar, the town began to change as well. The once lush forest that surrounded it had turned into a dark, twisted labyrinth. The trees were dead and gnarled, and the sky was always overcast, as if a storm was brewing. The townspeople had tried to cut down the trees, but they always grew back faster and thicker than before. The forest seemed to have a life of its own, as if it was protecting the beast and ensuring that it would always have a place to hide. And then, one night, the survivors heard a familiar sound. It was the sound of the beast, its howls echoing through the forest, calling out for them. They knew that they couldn't hide forever, that they had to face their fate head-on. With a mixture of fear and determination, the survivors set out into the forest, armed with nothing but their newfound strength and their will to survive. They knew that they might not make it out alive, but they also knew that they had to try. As they ventured deeper into the forest, the survivors encountered all manner of horrors. They saw creatures that they had never even imagined before, twisted abominations that seemed to defy the laws of nature. They fought their way through these horrors, driven by their desperation to reach the beast. And finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they found it. The beast was massive, towering over them, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. It snarled and bared its teeth, ready to pounce. The survivors didn't back down. They faced the beast head-on, using every ounce of strength they had to fight it. The battle was brutal and unforgiving, with both sides sustaining heavy injuries. But in the end, it was the survivors who emerged victorious. They had defeated the beast of the woods, but at a terrible cost. They were forever changed, their bodies altered in ways that would never allow them to return to their old lives. They left the forest behind, knowing that they could never truly escape the horrors that lay within. And so, the survivors wandered the world, forever haunted by the memories of their encounter with the beast. They knew that they had faced true horror, and that they had emerged from it changed forever. The beast of the woods had left its mark on them, and it was a mark that would never fade. As the survivors made their way out of the forest, they realized that the beast's defeat was not the end of their nightmare. The forest seemed to come alive around them, the twisted trees reaching out with gnarled branches to grab at them. The ground beneath their feet became soft and squishy, as if it were made of flesh instead of dirt. The survivors struggled to escape the forest, but it seemed to have a life of its own, trapping them in its grasp. The sky above them grew darker, and they could hear strange whispers on the wind, as if the very forest was mocking them. As they pushed forward, the survivors realized that they were not alone. They could hear the sound of footsteps behind them, heavy and deliberate. They turned to see a figure in the shadows, its eyes glowing with a demonic light. It was the beast, risen from the dead, its body still battered and bloody from the battle. It seemed to have gained new powers in its resurrection, able to manipulate the very trees around them and conjure up horrifying illusions. The survivors tried to fight back, but they were no match for the beast's newfound strength. They were thrown around like rag dolls, their bodies smashed against the twisted trees. The beast's jaws clamped down on them, tearing flesh from bone, as they screamed in agony. But even as they felt their lives slipping away, the survivors refused to give up. They struggled to their feet, fighting against the pain and fear that threatened to overwhelm them. They knew that they had to defeat the beast once and for all, or else they would be trapped in the forest forever. With a last surge of strength, the survivors attacked the beast. They tore at its flesh with their bare hands, clawing at it with their sharpened nails. They could feel the beast weakening, its body faltering under their assault. And then, with one final blow, they defeated the beast. Its body fell to the ground, still and lifeless. The survivors stood over it, panting and bloody, their bodies battered and broken but still alive. But as they looked around, they realized that they were not alone. The forest seemed to be closing in around them, the twisted trees and dark shadows surrounding them like a shroud. They could hear the whispers growing louder, the demonic laughter of the beast ringing in their ears. The survivors knew that they had to get out of the forest, but they could see no way out. They were trapped, surrounded by the horror that they had faced and the horror that still surrounded them. And then, as they stood there, lost and afraid, they saw a light in the distance. It was a beacon, a way out of the forest and away from the horror that had haunted them for so long. With a final burst of energy, the survivors ran towards the light. They could feel the darkness and horror of the forest trying to pull them back, but they refused to be held back. They had faced true horror, and they had emerged victorious. As they stepped out of the forest and into the light, they realized that they were forever changed. The horror of the beast of the woods had left a mark on them that would never fade. They knew that they would never be able to return to their old lives, that they would forever be haunted by the horror that they had faced. But they also knew that they had survived, that they had faced true horror and emerged victorious. And in the end, that was all that mattered.